Are you afraid of no trade deal?
Well, I'm not sure fear is the right word. I think it would be a very bad
What is the right
outcome.
word?
Anxiety.
Okay.
Planning would have to start right now. I mean, let's talk about what it would actually mean. It would be tariffs on 90% of UK exports, tariffs on 53% of imports, 22% on food, non-tariff barriers leading to checks on 5 times the quantity of goods coming in and out of the UK. It is a chaotic outcome for both sides. So I completely agree with the first part of the Secretary of State's statement that we are working towards a comprehensive free trade deal, and that must be uppermost in people's minds rather than no deal.
What are you hearing about plans over the next few days as British business, as international business, watches a series of key meetings that start with a dinner that the Prime Minister is going to have with Mr Juncker and then heading towards that summit? This feels like an incredibly binary moment for many companies. Do we or do we not put our contingency plans into place and start them? Start using them, because we're either going to move to trade or we're not going to move to trade.
Absolutely right. This is a crunch moment. So if you're a British firm, you have been living with uncertainty around the future trading arrangements now for 17 months since the referendum. This is now the moment where things need to move on, because the date of March 9, 2019 is coming so soon. So we know that firms are drawing up their contingency plans and buttons are being pressed. So 10%
being pressed now, or will be pressed? Well, OK, other firms will be pressing those buttons soon.
So we know, broadly speaking, the shape of this, because
Yep.
we've just completed a survey. So 10% of the firms we surveyed have already pressed the button. So they've already moved jobs, they are already changing their supply chains. Another 25% by the end of the year and another 25% by March. So that's 60% in total. That's what makes this date coming up, the 14th, 15th of December, so fundamental. We need to move onto trade and, crucially, onto a transition arrangement that provides that bridge to the future starting in March 19.
Do you have any optimism, Carolyn, Matt Miller here in Berlin, do you have any optimism that the UK government is going to be able to achieve that? Because the EU has made it pretty clear what they expect in terms of a divorce payment, and it doesn't seem to me that difficult to come up with the money.
Good morning. I actually do have some optimism here, because the mutual interest around getting this logjam broken is so strong. I spent a lot of time in Europe myself recently in conversations with businesses across Europe. This is reciprocal in many ways. No one wants to be spending money on new border officials and queues at ports. So I think that the desire to get through to the next stage is strong. I think people are working on both sides. The evidence is building up around the impact on the European and the UK economy. So I think that there is some grounds for hope. But we do need that urgency now, between now, even on Monday. I mean, I think that the date is actually even sooner than the 14th, 15th.
Is there any basis for optimism? I mean, after this is completed, do you see any silver lining, I'm curious, Carolyn, to Brexit happening, even if you were against it to begin with?
Well, I think one of the things that businesses say to us is they do just now want to get on with it. I mean, that is absolutely where we are, to get the right outcome and make it as successful as possible. The silver lining, I think, is interesting. It is that firms all across the UK are thinking about how they do business differently. And as you know, we have a challenge around productivity. We have a 20% gap with many of our peers. We want to address that. An industrial strategy was launched here yesterday. Big focus on R&D, big focus on skills. This is where I think firms are now really focusing attention. How do we get stronger, better, more competitive? Almost whatever the result of Brexit, but this has focused attention on that. That, I think, is the silver lining for us.
Helena Morrissey was sitting in the chair that you're sitting in now yesterday, and her view is constantly that we are doing ourselves a disservice by being so negative about what is coming. The conversations that we are having are simply not positive enough about the opportunity. Is there a sort of psychological story surrounding Brexit at the moment that we are not delivering particularly well? That the government, because it appears muddled, is giving the impression that we're not ready, that actually the opportunity is bigger, maybe, than we are giving ourselves credit for at this stage?
We have to get the balance right between kind of pragmatism and just the reality of what it would feel like if we went backwards in terms of globalisation and free market.
Yep.
So we do need those facts on the table. We need to understand what tariffs would feel like, what reducing the regulatory alignment we have with our biggest trading partner. You know, it is 50% of our export market. So let's not downplay that. But I am profoundly optimistic about the UK economy. My job is to talk to firms who are investing. We just saw yesterday Merck's announcement. We had the Google big investment up in the northeast. We've got huge renewables investment coming in. We're leading the world in cybersecurity. I am hugely optimistic. But we do need to get a good Brexit. There is such a thing as a good Brexit.
What does a good Brexit look like?
As a bad Brexit.
What does a good Brexit look like?
Oh, it is that we don't turn the clock back on the free trade that we have created with the European Union over 40 years. So it is about completely barrier-free trade. We must have as frictionless as possible. We mustn't create new rules that get in the way. It is difficult. Free trade is hard. We've done a lot over four decades. So for me, a good Brexit gets that kind of comprehensive arrangement that safeguards that.
So remaining in the single market, remaining in the customs union, is that something that's still possible, you think?
Well, we have said that that is absolutely the right thing for a transition period to maintain single market membership and customs union access. Beyond that, I think there is a case for keeping them on the table. I think we're seeing with the Irish situation the challenges of developing a frictionless border solution without at least considering that. So we can see a case for maintaining as many options going into the next stage. But of course, there are challenges in terms of what that means around the four freedoms, freedom of movement and so on.
Do you think the EU is asking the impossible at this point? Do you think the Irish are asking the impossible at this point? They want to have that hard border not to be a hard border. They want it to be a soft border, and they want somehow for the deal to be done that allows Ireland to remain united but divided at the same time. There's maybe some sort of border in the North Sea. Do you think the EU is being reasonable in its kind of we want more, and they haven't given much back in return? Do you think there's a sense of frustration in London that actually this is not being reciprocated on the other side of the fence?
We do need flexibility and reciprocity from the European Union, and I think it's one of the things that we have been arguing for as a business community across Europe. And Ireland, I think, is a hugely important issue. That we have businesses that have grown up over the last 40 years. Yep. There is absolutely no border. It's part of peace. It's part of prosperity. It's absolutely essential. But it is a difficult issue to solve in phase one. It's a difficult issue to solve before the middle of December because it is so tied up with the final shape of the final deal.
Precisely.
So I think the arguments for making that a priority, for guaranteeing that it is a priority in phase two, is very strong. But it is so important for our mutual economies that we make progress in December. I think it would be a great disappointment if this issue, too difficult to solve in phase one, prevented us from moving on to trade. It would be a great shame and I think a great loss for all our countries.